Good morning. I'd like to call this unique meeting of the Reno City Council to order Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask City Attorney Carl Hall to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Vice Mayor, with that, I will transition to our roll call. As we mentioned, this is unique. We are having this under emergency provisions as identified by Governor Sisolak in order to avoid the spread of COVID-19. We have many of our council members who are calling in telephonically today. As a reminder, this information is being broadcast on our YouTube channel, our City of Reno website, as well as our local cable access, and will be available for the record. Breckus?
Councilmember Breckus, are you with us? I know that everyone's likely on mute. Can you just identify yourself for roll call when the clerk calls?
I believe she is muted.
All right. Okay. Here. Here.
Thank you.
Dewar?
Yes, I'm here actually in the council chambers backing up our vice mayor.
Delgado?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Garden?
Here.
Reese?
Here.
Cheevy? I think Mayor is, she is calling me, so she's absent at this time. I'm guessing she's having challenges calling in.
Okay, well, let me just speak for a moment on the record while you figure that piece out. As I'm sure my colleagues have already done so, and we're about ready to get into the public comment period, I want to say a couple of things. Number one, thank you to everyone in the staff for putting together this alternative format for how we're going to conduct our meetings today and perhaps for the indefinite future. We have, of course, published on the Reno City government website as well as Twitter and social media the ways in which people can participate. And I'm proud to say that people have been participated. I know my colleagues have read the public comments that have been submitted. I want to commend Madam Clerk for her efforts on transparency in this regard. It is an extraordinary thing, and of course all of us would prefer public comment and the transparency that comes from public comment. But these are some extraordinary and unprecedented times. I know that we'll have a second public comment period towards the end of the meeting, and during that public comment period, anyone who has made comment online or through the clerk's office, through their voicemail or by email, will sort of wrap those back into it so that we can actually take public comment in real time. This is, again, an extraordinary measure at a difficult time. I also want to point out for my colleagues on the phone that Councilman Dewar and I are both in chambers physically. We are trying to observe the social distancing guidelines that have been given out by the state and the CDC, but we're going to essentially try to do some rotating of the chairpersonship as the meeting dictates, simply because, as you can all imagine from having chaired meetings, it's difficult to be the only one chairing a meeting for the entirety of it, and depending on how long it goes, you know, we may need to get up from time to time. And so Councilman Dewar was gracious enough to spend this morning with me here in chambers, so I thank her for that. The last thing I will note is we are having some technical difficulties that we'll work through. The clerk and IT have been extraordinary in doing that. The issue is that if anyone gets kicked off, just try to get back in. We'll put you back into the queue, and the clerk is going to be keeping track of those things, as well as trying to identify who would like to speak on any particular item. The goal, of course, is for everyone to fully participate, and to the extent that you're able to do so, please just let me know if you're having any trouble hearing or connecting. And then, of course, as we are all learning in these times, it is important that when you're not speaking that you be put on mute on your end so that we don't have to listen to, you rocking out to Pantera or your dogs barking in the background. It helps everyone to keep the quality of the feed going as well. And so if you're not speaking, simply just be on mute. Councilmember Dewar, you're in the chambers with me. Do you have anything you want to add to what I've just said?
The only thing I would add is that be aware that if you get another phone call, do not put the call on hold because that will send music into the chambers. So I would not answer any calls while you're on this call.
Yeah, we don't want to have a Harlem Shake moment here in the chambers. Those will come later. Thank you for that. And I'm now going to turn it over to the clerk, Madam Clerk, for public comment. If you have any additional things you'd like to say about public comment, I know it's been unique and challenging, but I thank you again for the efforts you've put into getting us able to conduct business in this way.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The mayor is attempting to call in, as many jurisdictions and organizations across the country right now are utilizing different telephonic options. We are getting through it to the best of our abilities. So with that, we will transition to general public comment. As was mentioned, we received online public comment as well as email. At this time, no one has utilized our voicemail system yet. However, that will remain in place in the coming times. I would like to note for the record, Madam Mayor, can you hear us at this time?
I can, thanks.
Okay, so we have a full quorum on the phone and in person. With that, we received various online public comments, as was mentioned. They are general in nature, do not pertain to anything on our agenda specifically. Concerns with the COVID virus were brought up by 14 different people. Those have been submitted to Reno City Council and are also submitted online for the public to view, and those have been reviewed and are part of the official record. With that, Mr. Vice Mayor, we are transitioning to your approval of the agenda. I'll send it to the manager with any changes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I do have one change, which is the deletion of B9, B as in boy 9. This was a resolution to move the council meeting date from April 8 to April 29. With the governor's action on these meetings and our ability to do this virtually, we no longer need to move that meeting. So I would request that come off of the consent agenda. In addition, I just wanted to point out, because I had some concerns expressed to me about expenditure of funds in this time. I did look in partnership with Ms. Lochner, our finance director, into the number of items that are on your consent agenda that have expenditure of funds. All of these are non-general fund. They are a combination of residential construction tax, CDBG and residential construction tax, and street fund, which is a property tax override, and gas tax that is earmarked for this purpose. So these funds are required to be spent on these items, and they are not general funds. As a result, I do feel comfortable with them going forward. Those are all my changes to the agenda. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Manager. May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar. I didn't hear the second was made by.
Breckus.
Thank you, Councilmember Breckus. Any further discussion on this item at this time? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion carries unanimously.
Our next item is the approval of minutes from February 12th. And Mr. Vice Mayor, I would request that we actually continue this item to the next meeting. There is an update and correction that is needed before the body accepts these.
Okay, can I get a motion for continuance of this item?
So moved.
So moved, Neil.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar, a second by Councilmember Breckus. Any further discussion on this item at this time? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Vice Mayor, next item is the consent agenda. We have no public comment registered for this. I would return it to you for specific items to be pulled by council members for discussion.
Okay, I'm going to start with Councilmember Dewar. If you have any items you'd wish pulled for discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would like to request removal from the agenda of item B11. It was continued at the last meeting. I went and visited the site. I have a few questions for our staff. I've not been able to connect with them before this meeting. I don't think it's time sensitive, so I'd ask for it to just be removed.
Okay, that's item B11.
B11.
Councilmember Weber, do you have any items that you'd like removed from the consent agenda? Okay, I don't think there are any, but Councilmember Jordan, do you have any items you'd like pulled from the consent agenda?
I do not.
Okay. Madam Mayor, anything that you'd like removed at this time?
No, thanks.
Councilmember Delgado, anything at this time?
No, I do not.
Thank you. And Councilman, I have nothing for the record. Councilmember Breckus, do you have any idea or any items that you'd like removed at this time?
3 and 5.
Okay, with those changes, which would be for the record, the removal of B3 and 5 to be discussed, and then the removal of B11 entirely at this time, can I please get a motion on the consent agenda items not pulled for discussion or moved to a later date, please?
So moved.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Dewar and a second by Councilmember Jordan. I have a motion and a second. In the absence of any discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed,
Aye.
please say no. Motion carries unanimously. I'll turn it back over to you, Councilmember. Oh, wait, did we have public comment on any of these?
We do not, no.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Breckus, can I hear from you on item B3?
Yeah, this is the award to the vendor of the new playground equipment over to Idlewild, and we're super excited about this. That playground equipment is very old, aged, probably not very safe to today's standards. But when I looked at the design options, and they came to my NAB, there were two design options. One is a tree fort concept, and then the other is a space concept. And the reason for the space concept is because Idlewild has a space age theme to it, to the park itself. But when I looked at, in preparation of this meeting, when I looked at the proposed one, the tree fort one, I'm not sure it looks particularly it looks like it's going to block the trees that are behind it. And I was wondering if maybe we could take a look at that. I don't like to get engaged in design issues at the table, but this one seems a little inconsistent from what I thought I saw before. So I don't know if staff's here or if someone, maybe the clerk could just bring up the video from that was in the attachment, and the council could maybe take a look at it.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I may,
Madam Manager.
we do not have staff in chambers to answer this question, but I would be happy to take it under advisement that there's a concern about the tree fort play structure blocking the trees. Is
Yeah,
that
I guess
my understanding?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. On the attachment to the staff report, on the PowerPoint, on number 7, slide 7, the tree fort, which is a tree theme, and the thinking was it's consisted with Idlewild that has a lot of trees, seems to obstruct the view of the trees from the playground, versus the space age one that looks like it wouldn't be quite as obstructed. So I wanted the council to make the design choice to see if the trees were going to be blocked. the aviation thing. Option 1 was the aviation theme, and it was just one tall space age play thing. And then the other one was the tree fort that has 2, and it just looks like if we're trying to honor the trees, we wouldn't want to obstruct the view of the trees, is what I was thinking. So I don't know, maybe we want to continue it so we can kind of get a view of it better. I'm just not comfortable going with it in that way in the context of the setting.
Councilman Jordan, thank you for your, I'm sorry, Councilmember Breckus, thank you for your comments. Councilmember Jordan, do you have anything you'd like to add? This is in Ward 5, as I understand.
That's incorrect.
It's in Ward 1.
Well, it says RCT District. Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. Okay. So I take it that's a motion for continuance. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for a continuance from Councilmember Jordan, a second, or from Councilmember Breckus, a second from Councilmember Jordan. Any other additional questions or concerns? Call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Item B5, Councilmember Breckus.
You know, this was about the elections and our relationship with the county, because we pay them to do our elections. And the state, I understood, went to an all mail-in election for the primary. They think it's going to be that way. They might do voting day registration. I think they're still working out the details. And I wanted to ask our clerk, since she's the staffer on this, if you think we should hold up on this, or if you have a different, because the agreement needs to plug in different financial numbers.
Councilmember Breckus, I can speak to that. I had a very lengthy conversation with the registrar, not only yesterday, but actually in multiple days this week to go over this. There are no changes necessary to our interlocal provision, as we're charged based off of registered voters, not how the actual election is administered. So she anticipates no change. They will have an increase in cost for this action taken by the state. However, that will not be pushed onto us, and there's no changes in the interlocal needed. At this time,
Okay.
the idea is only to proceed with an all-mail for the primary. There will be day of voting registration as required by state law as changed in this last legislative session. So people will still be able to register to vote the day of at the registrar's office.
Okay, thank you very much. I just think that's helpful information to get out at our local level, because this was breaking news yesterday. So thank you, and if there aren't any other questions, I'd make a motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Breckus. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second from Councilmember Weber. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries
Aye.
unanimously.
With that, Mr. Vice Mayor, we have finished your consent agenda. Our next item is item D1, summary of actions taken pursuant to the Reno Municipal Code regarding City of Reno response to COVID-19.
Okay, Mr. Shaver, you have a staff presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item, I assume?
We do not have specific public comment on any of the items today. They have been grouped in general public comment in the beginning and then general public comment in the end.
Okay, let's start with the presentation. Mr. Shaver.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Mayor, Mayor and Council. For the record, Dylan Shaver, Chief of Staff, City of Reno. Section 8.34.060 requires certain disclosures of actions taken to declare and then during a declared emergency. I'm going to provide for you a brief summary of actions we have done to respond to the emergency. It is by no means comprehensive. You don't have that kind of time. I'm just giving you the highlights. Some of those are required disclosures under 8.34 floor, and I will flag those as necessary, but they are not all required disclosures at this time. Just to go back in time, what feels like 7 months ago, all the way to March 13th, the Mayor Sheevy declared a state of emergency here in the city of Reno. The 14th and 15th, the city manager set forth a series of directives to staff to start preparing departmental response plans to this effort, so that the 16th, the city manager could then order the closure of all non-critical city facilities and allow as many of our workforce to work from home as is possible. Under 834060, the city manager also made 2 emergency declarations on that day in compliance with the mayor's declaration of emergency. The first was to suspend enforcement of the limitations on delivery and routes for transportation of goods and services to retail outlets. That was an action taken to ensure that we could maintain supplies at our grocery and convenience stores at a time when people needed them. I'm not sure if any of you have been grocery shopping lately, but certainly around that time, things were very, very sparse. And then the second was in order to suspend late fees for payments due to the city that cannot be made online over the phone. This was to facilitate and back up the actions to limit the number of people in the building. We wanted to ensure that we kept those online and digital options open, but as far as in-person payments, we were really discouraging that at the time. As I said, the 16th was really the last day we saw a full complement of staff here in City Hall. By that afternoon, the city manager had approved or amended the departmental response plans to scale back services. And I will add a little bit of editorial on that line, which is to say this team here really rose to that task. I don't think anybody in this workforce signed up to go home. And, but given the nature of the emergency, I think people understood the gravity of what we were dealing with, and it was largely a seamless and well thought out process. And I'd like, just on the record, even if no one is here or watching us, to give the kudos to the people who made that happen. And it's really too many that I'd love to be able to name them for you, but we'd be here all day. But really, the entire team rose to that effort. That evening of the 16th, the mayor then, and this is a mandatory 834060 disclosure, the mayor ordered the closure of restaurant dining rooms, bars, nightclubs, and athletic clubs generally open to the public. At that time, I will note that while she issued that order, to my knowledge, it remains unsigned. Madam Clerk, I hadn't checked in with you about that today, but the mayor's order to close the bars, we still don't have a signature on that, is that right?
I'll have to check my records.
Okay. Though I will say that I have checked in with the mayor, who indicated that she still does intend to sign that order. We just do not, at least last we saw, did not have that. Mayor, do you want to take the opportunity to correct me there, or? Okay.
Yeah, no, Dylan, it's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I believe the clerk has been coming to me, just so you know.
Okay.
Anything that also needs to be signed. Thanks.
All right. Well, for purposes of that and that signature, we will use this presentation as the mayor's disclosure under 834060 that action has been taken. Starting the 17th, the city's sort of work from home orders were in effect. And that afternoon, the governor issued his order closing all, quote, non-essential, unquote, businesses across the state. That sent your team into a flurry to figure out our mechanisms for enforcing and communicating such an order. And then on March 20th, we got significant further clarification notification in the form of Emergency Directive 003 from the governor's office that it was our first opportunity to review the regulations that would be around the governor's business closures. Again, that was late on a Friday. Your team spent much of this weekend trying to interpret those orders and provide guidance to Reno-based businesses. I believe that that has been sent to each of you and is available on the City of Reno's business licensure website, as well as on our COVID-19 page at reno.gov/COVID-19. We announced the interpretation of those regulations in conjunctions with our partners in Reno and Sparks on the 23rd. We thought it was important in responding to the pandemic to make sure that the regional partners in this area were operating cooperatively and consistently, rather than have a situation of like, well, why is my packaged liquor sale allowed in Sparks but not in Reno? And so we're going to continue forward to make sure, again, that we're responding in an effective way for the entire community, while of course focusing on our constituents. The 24th, which is just yesterday, we received a new series of orders down from the governor, the most prescient of which is, of course, the mandatory social distancing requirements, saying that basically if you are outside with somebody not in your household, you have to remain 6 feet apart or more, and prohibiting gatherings of 10 or more people. That also said that we are to discourage the use of our playground equipment and fields, and your Parks Department is working for the best way to implement that order as we speak. I will take this opportunity to thank the staff here at the city again for really rising to this occasion, and to acknowledge that we have sent home a large chunk of the municipal workforce, but there is a segment of the workforce that we cannot. That would be our firefighters, our police officers, the handful of folks who have to keep these sewers going, who have to, keep the roads open, have to keep our infrastructure in place. I will tell you that if there were a way to get them home and still remain a city, of course, we would love to do that. The governor's orders are very clear as to what must keep moving forward. So I just wanted to make sure that we were also on the record thanking all of those folks who cannot go home right now. We understand that your job is very difficult in times like this, and just want to make sure that the city's appreciation is carried with you. Mr. Vice Mayor, that concludes our mandatory disclosures under 834060, as well as the sort of surrounding context for those emergency actions taken.
Okay, at this time, do any of the council members have questions, either here in the chambers or on the phone?
This is Councilmember Breckus.
Councilmember Breckus, 3 minutes.
Yes, I have a question to Madam Manager. I sent her an email earlier today about the waste management franchise. I understand the transfer stations are closed and the recycle stations have been drop-off have been closed. I understand also that there's a request from the employees to cease our excess bag allowance pickup for a while, because the gloves that they have are in short supply and are tearing and would be diverted from other uses in the community. And I'm wondering if there's a mechanism in the agreement for us to do that, and maybe in lieu of that, have some roll-off containers around neighborhoods where people could go and drop stuff off themselves if they feel inclined, or something along those lines. Maybe even run a twice route, somewhere, at some point. And so I just wanted to pass on that to the rest of the council, and see if our manager can get examining that measure also.
Thank you, Council Member Breckus. I raised the similar concerns with our manager, and I know that she's up to the task of looking into it. I'll turn it over to her for any additional comments she'd like to offer, but I provided the same direction or response in writing this morning. Obviously, things are happening very quickly, and we had other things we were doing this morning. But Madam Manager, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I did receive the request from both of you and reached out to staff. They will be meeting with Waste Management later today to discuss that very issue, and so I should have some more direction later today. I will say that there is a belief that now that people are working from home, staying home, they likely are generating more trash at their homes. So that could be a concern for limiting the excess trash. So stay tuned and we will get back to you.
Thank you.
Madam Manager, could I?
Do you have a follow-up question, Councilmember Breckus?
I do. If they're not recycling, maybe the recyclables could be turned into regular trash receptacles anyway. I think that's how it was used when it first rolled out, when they didn't quite have the recyclables down. I know it's a step forward, to get people then, they've been so solid about having people not put trash in the recyclable containers. But I would imagine that, at least in my household, I'm not getting a lot of recyclables because I'm trying not to buy a lot of items that I would normally buy, to not put warehouse and delivery people, on the job to bring stuff to me that I don't need essentially. So maybe there's a balance out between the trash and the recyclable bins.
Thank you, Councilmember Breckus. I think we're looking into it. Appreciate your comments. I think they're very insightful. Do any of my colleagues have additional questions for Mr. Shaver at this time? Okay, I don't believe we need a motion, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Vice Mayor, our next item is item D2, presentation from Finance Director Debbie Lochner on potential loss of tax revenue in short and long term based off the impacts of COVID-19.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, council members, Mayor on the phone. Deborah Lochner for the record, Finance Director. And I'll just start with a couple quotes of what I've read over just this week. So one of the banks, Deutsche Bank, says, "This is truly unprecedented events with no adequate historical example with which to precisely anchor our forecasts. The evolution of the virus is also highly uncertain." So we also have, based on estimates, we've heard that the economy will shrink anywhere from 14 to 24% in our fourth quarter, which is the April to June timeframe. And the head of the St. Louis Reserve predicts a 30% unemployment and a 50% drop in gross domestic product by summer. So with that, we'll just go into the presentation. So I want to talk a little bit about how this is impacting our revenues. We'll show you some projections. Again, I want to preface that with the fact of we have no data to support the projections we're putting forward. That data won't come in until late May. We will talk about our CTAX. We'll talk about the debt that is actually backed with a secondary pledge of CTAX, just so you're aware. And some immediate financial actions that we have taken and are going to suggest we take. And then we'll talk a little bit about our budget that we're supposed to be passing in a couple short months. So CTAX is immediately impacted. As you know, 80% of CTAX is sales tax, and I'll show you that in a minute. Again, it's only speculative at this point, but we are expecting a significant drop in this revenue. We won't know, we won't have any actual data until May, late May. And so we will have already passed our budget by the time we actually have any data associated with this current pandemic. Property tax, again, the data is available to us this week. Unsecured taxes could go down, and we will see a dramatic impact on our new development. We have not looked into necessarily in-depth room tax, business license, building fees, rec programs, all those things. We're still analyzing what could be the impacts. But all these different funds are going to have impacts. Typically, you would say property tax wouldn't have an impact because there's a 2-year lag, but in the state of Nevada, there's two different ways for the businesses to value their properties. We think that the businesses will go and transfer to the income approach as a more beneficial property tax for them. So we will see a reduction in that and also immediate impact. This is just a kind of a screenshot of what Standard & Poor's is projecting for the recession. And then just to let you know kind of what Goldman Sachs and what JP Morgan are also projecting. This is, again, I have seen probably 30 different projections come out from various different agencies that in the financial sector. So this is just to give you an idea. And again, it's all over the board. Nobody really knows. Sure.
Could you just, this is a little bit of a complicated graph, and some people are looking at it online. Could you just give us a kind of a bottom line feel for what you're getting from this graph?
So what you're looking at is the gross domestic product. That's what GDP stands for. And you see what it was projected to be before the virus and after the virus. And you can see the dramatic decreases. Overall, you know, and then it lists the major sectors, right? So that are seeing the hit: consumer spending, non-residential fixed business investment, and residential investment. Those are all, you know, the major sectors. And so this is just showing what is projected to happen. So in the first quarter, which really is only 1 month of the virus, they're projecting that consumer spending is going to go down 1.2%, right? In the second quarter, which is, again, our fourth quarter, you can see that everybody's projecting a dramatic decrease. When you look at what Goldman Sachs is, they are saying that you're going to start seeing recovery in the third and fourth quarter. But if you look, the third and fourth quarter don't even equate to the second quarter decrease. And, you know, the first, they're capturing that 1 month. And then JP Morgan is just saying, you know, overall 14% decrease in
Quarter two.
in the second quarter. Just they
So
only
just to recap,
they only projected the 1 quarter.
minus 6% in quarter one, minus 24% in quarter two, plus 12% in quarter three, and plus 10% in quarter four. And you're saying the sum of that will not equal 24%.
Well, the sum of the upticks in the third and fourth quarter don't equal the drop in the second quarter.
So they would have an overall, I guess,
Overall, I
loss of
think
minus.
all the projections I've seen have an overall slight decline in this over the
So minus 1 or
over the year.
2% overall by the time we're done. Is that what you're saying?
for now, but that's with no data.
Okay,
And so
thank
once
you.
the data starts coming in, I think you'll see that this actually could get worse.
Okay.
Ms. Lochner, I think no one's asking you to be a financial forecaster or analyst on that scale. This one is not particularly helpful to me in understanding the impact, but you have one that comes later in the presentation, and I'll let you get to that, that really, for me, sums up the impact to us here at the City of Reno and identifies the decreases as you have discussed with local agencies. So when we get there, I think we'll be in a better position to talk about where the rubber meets the road. I appreciate this. It's very
This is
difficult.
just to give you an idea of how all over the board everybody is in their projections.
Totally understand.
And, you know, so
It's awesome. Thank you so much for your work on this.
wanted to show you, again, remind you the makeup of CTAX, because it is not all sales tax, but the last two are sales tax. So you're looking at 80% of our CTAX is made up of sales tax. Sales tax does react real quickly to changes in sentiment of how things are going. So whether it's good or bad really doesn't matter. It's a paradigm, you know, it's what their perception is. Real property transfer tax, you're going to see that going down. As people don't buy houses, you're not going to get the transfer tax. The government service taxes really is a motor vehicle tax, which people pay because they own their cars. And then, you know, cigarette and liquor, those, again, hard to say with the stores closed, but then, you know, not all stores are closed, so you really don't know what the habits are going to be on those, but they're very, very small component. The largest component, again, is 80% of sales tax. Wanted to again show you that our two largest sources of revenue are CTAX is 35% of our revenue and property tax is 27% of our revenue. And to show you overall, 80% of our expenditures are associated with employees' salaries and benefits. So for CTAX, we have received our allocations through December. We will get our January allocation at the end of this month, and then we'll get the February allocation at the end of April. We will see a small impact at the end of April, but again, this didn't become an issue for the public necessarily until things started really rolling about mid-March. So we don't expect to January and February to be impacted too much, and those are still trending above budget. But based on our discussions with other local agencies, so we keep in touch with our counterparts, and this is one area where we've talked with them. Some of them are saying that we could see a 25% decrease in our CTAX in March, maybe a 50% decrease in April, a 35% decrease in May, and this is year over year, and a 25% decrease in June. And so what we got last year, we're expecting those kind of decreases to happen. So this is just a scenario if that happens to show you that we really are looking at about an 8.9% decrease in 35% of our revenue. And again, this is just conjecture at this point. This is just a kind of a consensus of based on all that information we're getting from the banks and the financial markets and what our colleagues are looking at, and as we're trying to project this. Just real quickly wanted to show you the bonded debt that we have that is has a secondary revenue source of CTAX. So if you look, they are all, the primary source is room tax, but we also expect room tax to go down considerably. So we're not sure if we're going to have to hit into the CTAX as a secondary pledge on these particular bonds. And that's something that we'll continue to watch because we really need to see what happens with room tax. We're projecting actually room tax for the month of March at 0, right? If they're closed, they can't have any revenue other than maybe from their restaurant service if they have that. So we will continue to watch that, and we're really working with the RSCVA to see what we can come up with on a better idea for room tax. So things that we have immediately done, we have instituted a hiring freeze. That doesn't necessarily mean that no position will be filled in the city. It's going to be just really scrutinized at a much higher level going forward. Right now, we have 58 open positions. That is among safety and non-safety. We estimate that there's about $6 million in salaries and benefits in those 58 open positions remaining to be paid. Some of that money, when we actually did a salary savings analysis, we're really right on track to come in on salaries because the vacant positions really are paying for the severances and the overtime and the other things that we have not adequately budgeted in those areas. So this isn't really an area that we can necessarily come up with the shortfall, maybe a couple $1 million from this area. One thing I did want to discuss with the council, and this is where I think maybe you guys might want to have discussion, is around our SAFER grant funding. So we have not requested any reimbursement from the SAFER grant. We have paid for the staff. We are, as a finance department, I'm recommending that we decline the grant because the grant really does tie our hands to minimum staffing levels in the fire department, and we need to be able to be nimble and move things around as needed during this we don't know what's going to happen and how deep this might get, if it's going to, even go into a depression. We just don't know. And so my recommendation would be that the council give us direction to go ahead and deny that grant. And I'd really like to get that kind of direction from you if you agree.
Mr. Vice Mayor, Councilwoman George with a question.
Councilmember Jordan, let me first go to the mayor. I think she just was in line just a scotch ahead of you, and so I'll turn attention to her. But I wanted to ask Ms. Lochner, are we taking a pause at your presentation? You were looking for specific direction on that item?
On this particular item, yes, I need specific direction on it.
Okay,
The terms of the SAFER grant were that it would pay 75% of 8 firefighters for the first year. And then it goes down to 50%, and then it goes down to 25%. But it does have a minimum staffing requirement. And you have to maintain a minimum staffing in order to maintain the grant. We are not recommending that we cut any positions. We're recommending that we maintain the flexibility to be able to go there if we have to.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but I want to see, Madam Mayor, were you wanting to talk on this specific item or just in general? I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Deborah. Really appreciate it. It's kind of interesting because remember it's the last budget. I said, we kind of need a hold the line budget. I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are because I think it's past a hold the line budget and it's moved into an emergency budget, right? So, and with that, I would say I think we have to be extremely aggressive in the fact that we do not enter into contracts under any circumstances right now on, pending projects, whether it's sewer or police station. And also, we want to avoid layoffs at all costs. That's why, I think we have to look at how we can be flexible with our employees. But at the same time, I don't see how we bring on any more until, this situation changes. And it's very fluid, but I think this is going to take a while for us to rebound. So I would just ask, what are your recommendations on, more of an emergency type of budget? Because I think we're going to have to be extremely aggressive. This puts us in a really difficult position, and we hate to do this, but I think this is going to be sort of the new way forward, trying to, dig our way out of this. So, Deborah, give me an idea of, looking at some of those more aggressive approaches that you think would be beneficial in a time like this.
So, in speaking with my other finance colleagues in the area, we are not recommending that we change course on the budget necessarily, that we pass our budgets as currently projected because we have no data to support changing those projections. We know they're going to change. We're also, the only thing that we are going to recommend gets added to the budget this year is the clean and safe team because we think that the work they're doing is important and needs to continue. And we need to figure out how to fund that going forward. So what we will present to the council is essentially a flat budget with the revenues that we had projected. My colleagues are doing the same thing. What that does is allows us a lot of flexibility when we come back to amend and make changes. We won't go in danger of overspending what we've told the state we budgeted. It allows us that flexibility to move forward and make the changes in a much more nimble fashion than if we tried to cut all the programs now without the analysis behind it. So our expectation is that we will come back to council in August, maybe early September, when we have some data behind this and some targeted adjustments to reduce expenditures in the departments. Again, like you said, our absolute last resort would be layoffs. Our hope is that we can get through a process with the departments in the next month or two to look at core services similar to what Sparks does, where they start at a zero-based budget, but really drilling down to core services and what it takes to manage those. As we look at, we have to have a plan for reducing our workforce, our service, our whatever it is, what we do, and we also have to have a plan for restoring it. So you can't just have the cuts without the restoration plan, so that we make sure that we restore things in a method that really meets the organization's needs. So that's really kind of what we're working on. And my colleagues are doing the same thing, is really looking at coming back with better data right after we pass the budget, because we don't have any data to say what we should cut or how deep we should cut at this point.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Jordan, are you there?
I am. And kind of to Ms. Lochner's presentation, I guess my questions are more 30,000 foot that would influence kind of what the next steps are. So the recommendation as I hear it is to, rather than push for a delay in the submission of our budget to the state, in other words, asking for like a 90-day delay, you're saying submit it as we previously worked on with some modifications and then come back and submit a modified budget? I'm trying to understand that. But the second question is, how does that play in with what I understand is this federal package that was just agreed to in concept, although not voted on yet, that excludes cities under 500,000 from receiving a stabilization assistance?
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I may, this is Saber Newby. I think to answer your first question, we are pursuing a dual track. I know that there has been discussions through the Nevada League of Cities to see if the governor would delay our deadlines for submitting the budget. Absent that action, though, I think that what Ms. Lochner is recommending seems sound. With respect to this state of flux at the federal level, I know that, again, the League of Cities has been active in lobbying for inclusion of communities under 500,000 to get some relief. To my knowledge, that has not been successful thus far, but we continue to monitor.
So then my final question is, as we sit here today on March the 25th, how much cash on hand do we have for how long, assuming this drags on for 2 months? I mean, how long can we keep the lights on?
So we haven't gone to that level of detail yet, but because, again, we don't know what's going to happen with the revenues. Again, one of our scenarios shows $30 million going out of our general fund revenue sources, and that's a significant hit. So, again, I don't know how long we could keep the lights on because I don't know what's going to happen to those revenues. I don't know what's going to happen with, say, our part-time staff, or, how long we're going to be shut down where we're paying staff to not actually do a lot of the work that we hired them to do. So I can't really tell you that at this point in time, and that's why I'm recommending that we go forward with the budget that we have discussed, with the caveat that the departments are going to be very prudent in how they do their purchases and how they spend the money. Of course, everything they do is essential in everybody's, just like the businesses, right? Everything we do, we feel is essential. And now we need to just really dig down into core service and work out from there, and have a couple different scenarios so that we can look at making sure that we provide the service the community needs, not necessarily the community that desires. We'd like to, be able to provide everything, but we're not going to be in that situation going forward, and we're just going to have to watch it.
This is Jenny Reckes. Could I be recognized?
Hold on one second, because I have Councilmember Delgado, who's in the queue just ahead of you, and then we'll come back around. Councilmember Delgado.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I appreciate everyone's perspective thus far, and appreciate the report from Ms. Lochner. I, too, very supportive of what our council members have already stated. Right now, we're definitely going into uncharted waters, and I can't see where there's a clear end in sight. And so whatever way we can be practical in terms of looking at our core services and being somewhat overly conservative is something that I'd like to continue to suggest. The last thing, what I loved hearing is the idea of no layoffs. Of course, that's not what we want to do. But the idea of being a little bit more overly conservative than what we're possibly thinking about right now is something I feel a little bit more comfortable with. And just general conversations I've had with the governor's offices, that's what they're doing as well. I'm sure many of you have had that similar conversation in terms of where are there opportunities to support us. And I'd suggest and appreciate the proactive approach, but maybe this is a question to Manager Newby, is how have we approached the conversation with our employee groups and how they receive that. I think that's very important going in now with an open dialogue and conversation and making sure we are all seeing this together, and we're not seeing this in terms of a punitive way of how we're moving forward, but making sure everyone has a seat at the table and we're having conversations, and very candid conversations at that.
Thank you, Member. Councilman Delgado, Saber Newby for the record. We have just begun looking at these numbers, so those conversations haven't started yet. However, our internal team has begun to put together some thoughts, and we'll be scheduling a meeting with all of the bargaining units to provide them the same information we're providing you today, if not a little bit more as things develop and maybe we have more information to provide to them. Again, this is all very new, but I hear you loud and clear, and I agree that our bargaining groups need to be partners with us in this, and we certainly want to keep those lines of communication open. I understand that reduction in force is never something that we want to do, and I pledge that we will try and keep from doing that just as much as we possibly can while keeping our city in good financial hands. I don't know if Ms. Lochner has anything else to add.
No.
Ms. Lochner, can I ask a very specific question and follow on to Councilmember Delgado, and that is simply this. You're saying your recommendation today is that we hold the line on the budget as presented. And my concern with that, and just hear me out, because I know that you're incredibly capable, is that if we do that, then we're sort of locked into a particular position, and it will be much harder to do flexible or different approaches to that. So I'm trying to understand if we need to make significant structural changes today, and then if in December we're doing awesome and the economy's booming again, we go the other direction. It seems like we have two options. Option one is to continue on the path that was set out for us. Option two is to identify, maybe not today from the dais, all the ways in which we could be more aggressive, and then come back to have that conversation. Because I just fear that even though your recommendation today is a sort of a hold the line budget, if we need to be more aggressive, we know that revenue is going to decrease. We know that this is not going to look pretty for us because we are already in a very tight budget to begin with. So I'm trying to figure out why might not the best path be something more aggressive at today?
So, as discussed with my other financial colleagues, this really, they are putting in the budget that they had discussed with their boards up to the point this happened. It allows us the greatest flexibility to go in and actually make those adjustments, and we can do augmentations on the budget all we want, but I really want to make sure that the departments have some time to really think through the process with us and what the core service is and what it takes to manage that core service. And I'm not sure we can do that in a month and a half.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And ultimately, that is the long-term goal, is to have a good and stable, consistent budget, which takes more time than we've given you. Totally appreciate that. I think what your body and my colleagues are all saying is we acknowledge what's on the horizon. We want to get significantly more conservative in our approach. We now need to have you with the opportunity, knowing, as Ms. Newby said, that the budget timelines may all get moved, and the federal government is now playing in this arena too, and we don't know what that's going to do. So we need to give you a bit of air, but you need direction from us as to how we move this forward, understanding that we need to be as aggressively conservative as possible. And I don't know what the right terminology in your world is.
That's a good one.
But that is ultimately my goal, is that we would be aggressively conservative with how we forecast. I don't want necessarily in, I guess it would be May, for us to be passing a budget that looks at the world before this virus happened. If you need more time, I'm willing to give the time to make good decisions ultimately. And so that's just where I find myself today, knowing that we may have to make hard decisions and core services will be the priority for all of us. We know that that's true. Obviously, I know that you're working hard, and we're now going to basically ask you to go through this whole process again with a different lens than you might have anticipated. And I believe you're up for the challenge. I know it will not be easy. I thank you in advance for the work that you're doing. Can I come now to Councilmember Dewar, who...
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Just a couple points. A point of clarity for me, you have, Ms. Lochner, said we should move forward with what is the budget that we discussed. In other words, the budget we discussed. I'm a little unclear if you mean the one we discussed a couple weeks ago during our 3-day budget discussion, which included a number of increases. It obviously embedded CPI, it had raises, it had new projects, or what an alternate. Okay, well, it didn't from your perspective, but the departments did present.
What the departments presented were what they felt they needed additional resources to do other things in their departments.
Right.
That has not been included in the budget. It wasn't included in the budget. It was just a discussion to see at the time what the council would want us to put in the budget. After that meeting, everything kind of fell apart, and so we got direction in the finance department from the city manager to take out all additional needs with the exception of the clean and safe team. And so essentially what we are recommending that we move forward with is essentially the base budget that I asked for to begin with. And then knowing that we're going to come back in August or September with some adjustments to that budget, reducing the revenue and reducing the expenditures in some targeted areas. That's
Good.
what I'm recommending.
So I wanted to get this clearly on the record because you've used the term "what we discussed"
Right.
several times. And what we discussed was presentations with increases. And what you and the manager discussed was a base budget with the addition of the clean and safe team. So I just wanted, those terms were a little.
And I do want to also let you know that everything that's been approved as far as adjustments to the collective bargaining agreements is included.
Okay.
Because those are agreements we have signed. We have not gone back and come with a different agreement at this point. So that's all included.
That's what I wanted to get really clear on the record.
So essentially what we're putting forth is a base budget with all the contracts that we have citywide included in there, whether that be power, water, insurance, all those contracts and all the increases in those contracts are in there. Now, what we're going to be coming back with in August or very early September would be the department's suggestions on where they could cut and what that would mean to service so that you can have that discussion.
Okay. Then my follow-up is, and thank you for clarifying because I really think that gives a little more clarity. You've asked us a specific question about the fire grant. In the slide, you did not give us the amount, but what you've told us 75%, 50%, 25%. But my first question is of what? So what's the total? And I know it would be increasing because salaries increase. Could you just remind us of what the total number is?
I don't have that off
Okay.
the top of my head.
When we talk next.
But again, what we've done is we've hired 8 firefighters under a grant, and we haven't requested any money off the grant. The hiring of those 8 firefighters and the acceptance of that grant requires a minimum staffing level. As we go through this process, while I recommend we maintain the staff we hired and we continue to pay them, but not accept the grant that would offset those costs, because that really does tie our hands and takes away our ability to react and be nimble.
So you're suggesting that we continue to pay 100% of the costs of the
I
aid?
I am suggesting that, and as we review what our expenditures are citywide and within each department will decide what is important for them to keep.
Okay, that's a good clarity that
Yeah,
that's really
I want to
helpful.
make sure we're not like saying we're not going to accept the grant and we're not going to hire the people. We've already hired the people, and we're going to keep the people.
Okay, so then my follow-up question on that is, what is the date by which we initially had to tell them if we're accepting the grant?
I don't know, the council accepted it.
No, accepted the grant.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
council accepted the grant.
So just one follow-up there too.
But being as, we've checked with them, and being as we have not taken a draw on the grant, we can decline the grant.
That's
now.
what I wanted to know. And then finally, we also have pending a $5 million grant that we were supposed to get some matching by July 1, this coming July 1. And I've recommended to our manager, and I wanted to daylight it here, that we go back to the Pennington Foundation and ask for an extension versus just not accepting it or deferring it. I think we should ask for a very clear extension, even of 1 year, to make the match. So I wanted to throw that in there too, because that's part of these revenues and so on.
Councilmember Dewar, can I just add to that? And then I have a question, and then I want to go to Councilmember Breckus, who's been very patient. But as to any grant, and we'll talk, there's the Pennington one that she just mentioned, and then the SAFER grant. I'm number one, I'm just a little concerned that we didn't, and would be for legal, I'm not sure we agendize like a bunch of direction on the SAFER grant. And as a result, what I will recommend to the body is simply that we go back to present options, and that you'll be able to present concrete options on that one on April 8th, because I just don't feel like we can give good direction today. I don't know if the federal government is going to say, hey, everybody out there who said you were going to do SAFER grants, we're now going to inject more money into it, or we're going to change the terms. I know that we accepted it, and so to unaccept it, I think we'll have to agendize it more. I'm just concerned. And so if that will be my recommendation of the body. I also wanted to understand in this same vein, because Councilmember Dewar makes a good point, we have had conversations over the last several months about the Building Enterprise Fund. And I don't know what the status is of, I think there are loans to the general fund. There are no loans to the general fund currently. Can you just clarify that?
The only thing in the building fund and the sewer fund both owed several funds from a number of years of cost allocation settle up that had been carried on the books since 2002. So there was, in that period of time, there was an enterprise fund for technology that went away. So that piece that was owed to the technology fund would go to the general fund. That's going to happen in the third augmentation anyway, because it's money owed, and so, it goes back and forth.
Okay, so it's just an accounting principle.
It's just an accounting thing
Okay.
that we're going to actually do, that move the
We'll
money.
zero it out. It will not be identified as loans from the,
Right.
okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'm
hold on.
sorry to jump in on that one point, just I want to get with you offline, Ms. Lochner, as the liaison to the Enterprise Fund, because I have some other thoughts, so just a placeholder.
Yeah, no problem. I guess ultimately, what I'm trying to figure out is, through this process, there will be things like this. Each one of us has different groups that we are liaisons to, different funds that we sort of have a hand in, CDBG or others. We're all going to have a bunch of questions going forward. This is ultimately why, when you and I spoke just a few minutes ago, I'm saying, take a deep breath. We've got to figure this out. It's very difficult to change and jump on a dime. The SAFER grant is very concerning because, of course, it's millions of dollars, and it involves the commitments over a period of time that we may not be able to do. I would like to ultimately, when you come back with that item, if that's what the body chooses, I need to know what our chief, Cochran, his thoughts on it. I'd like to understand, because, of course, we accepted that grant because we, as a body, believe it is important to increase our staffing, right? And we've made a commitment to help public safety. And so I don't want to necessarily backtrack on that concept, but I want us to be realistic about the dollars that are being talked about and how they obligate us. I mean, I'm thinking about things like how much CTAX, based on your slides, is going to have to go towards the event center, the bowling stadium, which is now not got bowlers in it. I mean, these are big structural changes, and if we need to, again, be conservatively aggressive or aggressively conservative, whichever way you characterize that as being important, we need to do that. And I think each member has a lot of questions, and that's why we're kind of popcorning in and out of these things. So I appreciate it.
One thing I do want to just let the council know, we're already below the minimum staffing on the SAFER grant.
Already.
Already.
Okay, I understand what you're saying there.
In normal operations, we were already below.
I guess, again, just so that we can get some other questions in, those are my thoughts on the specific issue which you've presented today of the SAFER grant. I'm hopeful that we can just move that to another agenda item and discuss it on April 8th. I think there are other council members who haven't gotten as much opportunity to speak in, weigh on others, so I want to go to Councilmember Breckus, and appreciate your patience. Sorry, it's just kind of weird because I don't know who's entirely in line, and so you're on, Councilmember Breckus.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we've got you now.
Hear me? Okay. Ms. Lochner, on the early part of your presentation, you said that you thought businesses in Nevada do income calculations. I thought those were only unlimited gaming license holders.
No, I've heard of other businesses. Maybe they had slot machines in them. I don't know.
Yeah, I know you're new to Nevada, and you're doing a great job, but that'd be helpful in the analysis. I think it's been over a year since I discussed that with the assessor on how they do that, but I can circle back. I believe every business has that opportunity. Okay, on their property tax.
Property tax.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's figure that out. And then, can you go back to your slide on the debt? Okay, so which are the ones that the 2006 room tax, those are the ones that just go on forever. Whenever the debt's paid, they expire, right?
I believe that's correct.
And then the okay. Now the CTAX backed ones are the other ones. Which one of those is the redevelopment one that you were brought to us before about the workout?
None of those are redevelopment.
Okay, so you're not even going over redevelopment. These are the backup. Okay, because the three below then, to my understanding, during the Great Recession, I think we paid about 17 million in general fund to back those when the revenues weren't coming in. And, it's going to be like a reoccurring nightmare then to have to know that we've got these out there with vulnerability to the CTAX. So the redevelopment is another one you didn't include on that, and I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. I think much the same way that Ms. Dewar brought up the Pennington grant and then the SAFER discussion, I do think that we need to look at the backing on that $55 million STED plan. Have we drawn down from that yet and executed that agreement?
That bond closed yesterday, and we received the first $2.6 million draw off of it.
Are we on the line just for that 2.6 million, or are we on for the whole 55 million?
So the way that the loan works from the state, it is on a draw schedule, and you pay the interest based on what you've drawn.
Yeah, I would like to see that come back to us for discussion. I've concerned that, obviously that cost was just, that 55 million was just the first part of it. We still need to figure out what to do with the effluent. And I'm also, while the sewer fund is very healthy, we know we have work behind us, and that gets into growth projections too, and also accounts unpayable on the whole sewer side also. So I would like to see that come on the table. I do think that we're in and advertised for the Safer Grant discussion, and I understand where you're going on that. I guess if it does come back, and there's timing for us to make the decision, some breathing room, we should take that which we can to see what the federal landscape is going to look like, and also know that that's a revolving opening of grant applications. So maybe we can, take another swing at it next year. But I worked on federal stimulus before, and I know that it usually boosts existing federal lines. So there could be some breathing room on that, and the more we can look to see what the opportunities are, the more clarity we'll have. And then the two other things is, if we could get a list of those open positions that the manager's recommending freeze right now, I think that would be helpful to the council to know where our limitations are right now. So the council knows where we're down resources in terms of, the dialogue we have with our constituents, the initiatives we ask to get attention to. If there's not a body, because we're waiting for that body to get filled, and knowing that it may not get filled, it can be something that we can realistically absorb, that, it's a not a core service that may not be getting attention to. I don't know what some of those are, but, maybe there's some of the, and obviously I'm talking about non-public safety. And then, let me ask you another question. The terminology you use about the budget seems to be like it's sewn up and done. And I understood a couple years ago, was surprised that we're required to have the budget down to the state by a certain date, a preliminary budget. Isn't that correct?
Yes, we have to have a preliminary budget to them. I believe I think that's due at the April 1st, and then our final budget has to be submitted to the state June 1st.
Okay. And I don't know if the rest of the council knows that. I only found that out maybe 4 years ago or so. And so, I'm intrigued by the idea of moving the deadline back, but the augmentations can pretty much give that, opportunity anyway. And so you have a budget down there, or you're sending it down there next week. And is that the manager's recommendation, the one that you just discussed to us?
Yes, so what we typically do, we don't have council's adopted or recommended budget by the April 1st deadline. We typically have the study sessions with council. We have a meeting with the city manager. She tells us what she wants us to put in based on what we all heard from the council. We provide some recommendations based on what we heard from the departments. We come together. Those are the things that get added. And then we report to the state the preliminary budget, and then that's what we typically would present in the study sessions in May. The preliminary budget that we submit to the state does not have to be our final budget. I mean, it would be silly if it was, because then why have all the process after that? So what the state is looking for is an idea of where we're going with our budget to ensure that we're not doing anything radically weird. That's what they look for. And then when we submit our final budget, if there's some major variance, then we just tell them why it's different, and we move on.
Yeah, I guess I could just say to the council, a position of, conceptually thinking this is that she's got something ready to go down April 1. We just, roll that over to May and work in that, world for a little bit, and then we go into budget in, July, August, when she has more knowledge. That will give her a break on not having to, send in something different, and we can just articulate to everyone conceptually that, look, we're just adopting our placeholder preliminary budget until August, and I think that's a very feasible approach.
Councilmember Jordan, thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Councilmember Breckus. I'm going to turn it over now to Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you very much. And I guess, and I don't know how procedurally this works, because these are all, I feel like we're flying a plane in the fog with no equipment working really. I guess my question is this, is thinking it all the way through, do we want to be sending a budget that looks as though our projections are that we're going to be fundamentally, okay, I guess, and then coming back? What I'm trying to get at is, as of this morning, the Nevada League of Cities says any jurisdiction under 500,000 is not getting any stimulus stabilization funds. So is there a way to submit a budget that says, here's what our placeholder would normally look like, but this is our worst case scenario? I mean, our federal delegation needs to know, again, back to my how long with our current cash reserves can we fund operations versus debt service, and how does the stimulus package address those that could impact our debt service or not? I mean, I don't know if it's premature to be sending a somewhat smoothed out budget when it's so.
Councilmember Jordan, for the record, Saber Newby, I hesitate to say it this way, but I believe that the submission of the preliminary budget for the state and for locals is really just a first blush, and they do not necessarily look at that as our intended final budget. I hesitate to say sort of a check the box kind of situation, but it is very, very preliminary. If it pleases this body, and I believe it may, we can certainly submit it with a statement that this is obviously very preliminary. We know that our revenues will decline and that we expect there to be larger than normal revisions in the final budget as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. For the second question regarding the Relief Act, I'm going to ask Mr. Shaver to speak to that.
Thank you so much, Madam Manager. I'm always reluctant to interrupt the finance director. There's severe consequences to that. Nevertheless, there have been a handful of references to the Relief Act and how there is no stimulus available to cities of fewer than 500,000 residents. And I just want to make clear that what a city of our size would be precluded from doing under that would be applying directly to the federal government for relief. The bill itself does allow a minimum $1.25 billion with a B dollar disbursement to each state at a minimum, and then using a population formula above and beyond that. That money would then go to the state to be distributed in basically the same manner that CDBG monies are represented. The city of Reno would get a significant amount under that. What we would not be able to do is just apply for additional funding beyond what we're already getting. I just wanted to make sure that was very clear. We're not getting rolled in this package. It's just that the way the money comes to us is a little different. Beyond that, there are also additional categories of funding that will be available to us on an application basis. Our federal lobbyist will brief you when we have all the details on that. But I just wanted to step in to make that clarification going forward, that there's nothing in there that would say nothing would come to a city of our size. Thank you.
That was very helpful, Bill, and I appreciate that. So maybe in light of kind of the dissection of the stimulus package as it unfolds and gets voted on, maybe we could have an interim meeting to better understand what the impacts to us are and when those monies can realistically be doled out to our jurisdictions. And I go back to my initial question of what are our cash reserves in order to keep the lights on, and how do those cash reserves get applied to debt service versus operations until we get some of that backstop of money. Thank you.
So one thing I do want to make sure the council is aware of is we do have insurance for the lost revenue. We've made a claim. We're still working through that. You know, the claim is really just what we think it will be. And so we've just kind of put a placeholder claim in there. So for this fiscal year, and then we're looking at, you know, what it will be going forward. But we're looking at various different ways of making sure that we have the cash flow to continue to do this. And right now, it's not a cash flow problem for us. We have cash. I've been in agencies where we didn't have cash, and that's not our problem at this point in time.
Councilmember Jordan, if I could, and just interject momentarily, the reality is I feel like I may be foggy, but I think our city is not. I think we're in good hands with people who are looking at the rapidly changing political landscape, the financial markets. I am confident that we will keep our lights on, that we will serve the city and community that we have sworn to do so. I don't think there's any chance of that happening. Ultimately, we're going to all be changing rapidly, and I believe, as I suggested with one of the earlier items, you know, at our next meeting on April 8th, we'll have more clarity on all of these things, right? We'll know what the federal government really is saying in the stimulus package rather than what pundits are saying, right? We're all watching a 24-hour news cycle change so quickly. We'll have financial information that we didn't have today. We'll have information about when the budgets are going to be actually required to be submitted, all those things. So for our public, I think the important thing is that they understand that we continue to do the good work that we are, knowing that there will be changes. And you are entirely correct that we need to be paying very close attention to all of the inner workings of various aspects of it. And I know that our staff are up to the challenge. Thank you for your leadership specifically, because I know that you have been really looking at all of these things critically. And from my perspective, that helps me to better understand where we're heading. So I thank you for that. And again, I think you might have been done with the question you asked, but I want to come back to you, Councilmember Jordan. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add at this time?
Just to kind of put a bow on that conversation, and it wasn't that we, were totally in the fog. I guess what I was trying to better understand is how our cash position afforded us some time to get to that point of what the stimulus package and other mechanisms gave us some more clarity. So actually, Ms. Lochner and Mr. Shaver's comments gave me a level of comfort. Thank you.
Me too. Can I go back to one thing that was said by one of the other council members about, and I think it was Councilmember Breckus who had a question about, the sewer and the sewer expansion. Ultimately, one of the things that I want to make sure that this community is in a position to do is that if we are in a position to borrow money at a better rate, to build at a time when construction costs will be significantly down, and that we have the person power resources to do it, and we have, in some ways, a community that is able to do the work, that we don't sort of cut off our nose to spite our face. Ultimately, as you can imagine, in every economic downturn, the thing that has allowed some communities to better weather the storm are large-scale infrastructure projects. And I'm not talking about, massive rebuilding of our nation's infrastructure. I'm just saying that we have aging roads. I think Councilmember Breckus mentioned her vast experience with infrastructure and this shovel-ready concept. I just don't want us to ignore the fact that we might have better labor opportunity costs, better borrowing opportunity and power, materials, the raw materials that are needed to do things. And so if we need to continue being a generator of economic vitality as a city, we're in a better position than some communities to do that, because we are poised to be able to do some of these things. So I would not want us to ignore that while sort of hunkering down, right? And ultimately, I think our public works director, accelerated or could accelerate projects. I saw the RTC did an amazing job of accelerating the Midtown rapid transit project, essentially because knowing that we would have some closures of businesses, they went out and have been scraping the Virginia Street. And again, I think they get to do that in part because there's closures, the material that goes into asphalt and petroleum and all those things is cheaper, and there are people who are hungry to work in this community. And so I hope that we'll be in a position to put them to work and to put our own powers in that regard to work in that regard. Is there anyone else on the phone who has additional questions? I know Ms. Lochner's presentation actually had one or two more slides, and I think that there perhaps would be important to continue sharing them. And I know that we all have a lot of financial trepidation right now. That's why we're so actively engaged, and that's why you're getting so many questions. Is it, Ms. Lochner, do you desire to share some additional information with us?
Sure.
Okay. Can we do this, though? I think all of us have probably likely been sitting for a few minutes. I'd like to take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to ask Councilmember Dewar to just direct traffic for a bit. You can imagine there's some fatigue that comes with trying to navigate these things, and Councilmember Dewar has been gracious enough to share the room today. So I want to transfer some of that over to her if she's willing, and we'll take a break for, let's take a break now for 10 minutes. And that gives everyone the chance to get up and move around, use the restroom if you need to. We'll come back in 10 minutes, which would be then 10 minutes to noon. So 10 minutes to noon, let's all be back.
I'm ready. So we'll just. Okay. Whenever you tell us.
Okay, Mr. Vice Mayor, we'll call your meeting back to order.
All right, this is actually Councilmember Naomi Dewar, and I'll be taking over for a little while from our Vice Mayor Reese. I would like to turn the presentation back to our Finance Director to conclude your presentation, then reopen for council questions.
So I don't really need to go through the rest of the slides. I think you guys can read them. If there's specific questions, happy to answer them. Some of the projections are a little hard to understand, with the 3 different lines coming off. If you want more explanation of that, I'd be happy to send you a memo that kind of outlines it for you a little bit more detail, so we don't have to go through it now.
Okay, well, would you, though, like to just summarize? You only have a few more slides. I have no problem with you showing them.
Well, so there's just one more slide, really, just on the financial actions. We do have about $2.9 million in our stabilization fund. We can consider that wiped out. It can be used for this. It will be. And we'll start all over again trying to rebuild that fund. The departments have been asked to really be judicious in what they spend going forward. Again, we talked about the budget, so I don't really need to come back to this again, but we will continue to keep you informed as things come forward. These are things that are going on. We just wanted to, like I said, we're going to continue to manage as things come, if there's financial implications, and continue to analyze everything. The federal aid package, in my experience, I've never seen federal aid come to us without it being a grant that had some strings attached. So we would be looking at those to make sure that the strings that are attached do not reduce our flexibility to handle the what we're doing. So we're looking at both short-term and long-term cost savings, efficiencies, all that. And then again, we do have labor negotiations going on. So the rest of this was really just to show you some projections, but the projections, like I said, are really just, throw some things out there and see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen. There's no data behind it at this point.
Ms. Lockhart, could we plan to just have you bring back some projections at one of our future meetings, as soon as you feel like you have any kind of fix on it?
So the soonest we're going to have actual data would be the end of May. So we were planning on coming back in August. I can come back and give you a quick update in June before you take your break, and then we can come back with a more detailed, data in August and early September.
And it might be helpful, though, even before June, to have sort of a optimistic, a probable, and a very conservative projection, just to get our minds thinking about it later. I'm not asking today.
We do. We have pretty much 3 scenarios, and what we put in this presentation is the mid-range scenario, because we always go with the middle of the range. But we do have a doomsday scenario and an okay scenario.
I do think it would be good to share that with us, so that we can start planning. We have to think this all through. We have to think about what's in front of us, the major projects that the city, has been wanting to start, and all of that. So let me open it for questions, and I'm going to start actually with Mr. Reese, who is sitting right here.
Thank you. I don't think I have specific questions on the remainder of your presentation. I do want to make sure that I clarify in case it was misinterpreted. I believe we will have to take action at some point in time on some of the key things we've talked about, whether that is the SAFER grant, the Pennington grant, the continuation of the sewer project. I'm not suggesting that we have or should vote on that today. I'm just saying that as a practical matter, I want to give your staff and you the time to work through all of the things that we're raising, rather than try to make those decisions today. For me, I'm uncomfortable doing that because, for example, I haven't heard from Chief Cochran about the staffing issues related to SAFER grant. I don't know what the employees would say about all the things that could come with that. And so I need more time to make those choices as well. And so that was sort of what I was just trying to clarify earlier. But otherwise, I understand where we are. I'm going to be leaning heavily on you, the manager's office. Ms. Newby has been in constant contact, I know, about a lot of these things. And when we start to have to take those hard votes, I will be ready and willing to make those decisions.
Okay.
Councilmember Dewar, if I may, during the break, we had a discussion among staff, and we will get together and come back to you, as you had suggested on April 8th, with some more scenarios and thoughts and recommendations.
Okay. To conclude this presentation, what I'm going to do is call on each council member by ward number, finishing with the mayor, and I'm going to ask you just if you have any concluding comments. So I'm going to start with Ward 1, Jenny Breckus.
And thanks, staff, for the work on this, and we'll talk about it next meeting.
Okay. I'll go to Ward 3, Oscar Delgado. Councilman Delgado, do you have any follow-up comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none at the moment, I'll go to Councilwoman Weber, Ward 4.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Thank you, Councilwoman Dewar. I do have a couple of questions and comments. I believe that Ms. Lochner did suggest that the SAFER grant was something that needed to be worked on today, and she wanted us to move forward today with the comment or with the point that these firefighters have already been hired, they are working, and why is it that we can't make that decision today? And that they're already operating on a minimal, I think that's what the comment was. So I think that it is time to make some tough decisions, and that's what we're here to do. And if it's something that is under this agenda item, I don't know why we can't make that call right now if that's what she has asked for.
I'll just pop in. Thank you for the question, Councilwoman Weber. Very good point. I will point out that our next meeting is very shortly, on April 8th, which is in 2 weeks. I think Mr. Reese's point was that to actually consider a contract, we would want the contract in front of us and on the agenda so that everyone knows, including those firefighters and anyone else interested, that that is a specific item that we will be discussing. And in this time of limited participation in the meeting, no one from the public can really comment on that right now. Knowing it will be on a future agenda, they could send us comments and provide comments. We could have our fire chief here. I think it would be a more robust discussion, but let me ask Ms. Lochner if she has any more points to that.
No, and it doesn't need to be decided today. It really was just, something that we felt that could continue to allow us the flexibility to move through this process.
And then did you have more comments, Ms. Weber?
No, and thank you so much. Thanks to both of you.
Okay, you bet. I'll call
For
on
those comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call on Ward 5, Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. And when we reconvene at our April meeting, I think it's important that someone lead with the update on the federal stimulus details, because that to me is going to shape a lot of the decisions and what we're going to be doing. And by that, I mean, if there's any projections on updates, on the impacts, on the timing, so we can make some of our budget decisions based on what we anticipate through that stimulus package. So I think we should lead with an update on the stimulus.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Anything else, Councilwoman Jordan?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay,
everybody.
thank you. Madam Mayor, would you like to conclude our discussion?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, let me just check in with Ms. Lochner. I think we're concluded. All right. We'll be moving on to item E1, and this is an ordinance introduction, and so we'll need the city attorney to read that ordinance introduction for us.
Thank you. This is an ordinance introduction, bill number 7135, ordinance to amend Title II, Chapter 2.06, Article 2 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Appoint of Offices to add Director of Utility Services, job title and qualifications in Section 2.06.050, together with other matters properly relating thereto.
All right, thank you so much. We don't have public comment in the room. Madam Clerk, was there specific public comment submitted on this item?
No.
No, thank you. I'm going to go.
So moved.
Oh, excuse me. I was just going to quickly open it for any comment from our council.
I second the motion.
All right, I've had a motion from Councilmember Reese, second from Councilwoman Weber. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to items F, ordinance adoption, and we're going to start with item F1. I don't believe you have to read it except for the bill number, is that correct?
Councilmember, I typically read them all, and I was
Okay.
going to suggest that we take all of these F items together, so I can read F1 through 7 all at once, and then
Okay.
you can jointly move unless there's any opposition to that.
Okay, I'd be very open to that. Is there, without objection? Hearing no objection, if we'll take items 1F, F1 through F7, and if you can read all of the titles, please.
Thank you. So F1 is ordinance adoption, ordinance number 6553. Ordinance to amend Title 1, Chapter 1.05.535 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Administrative Hearings, Procedures at Administrative Hearing, Admission of Evidence together with other matters properly relating thereto. Item F2 is ordinance number 6554, ordinance to amend Title 1, Chapter 1.05.600 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Appeal to Court, Appeal of Administrative Order to Court, together with other matters properly relating thereto. Item number F3, ordinance adoption, ordinance number 6555, ordinance to amend Title 4, Chapter 4.04.160 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Business License Code, General Provisions, Appeals, together with other matters properly relating thereto. Item F4 is ordinance number 6556, ordinance to amend Title 4, Chapter 4.04.170 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Business License Code, General Provisions, Hearing, together with other matters properly relating thereto. Item F5, ordinance number 6556. 6557. Ordinance to amend Title 5, Chapter 5.15.140 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Sidewalk Vendors, Appeal, together with other matters properly relating thereto. F6, ordinance number 6558. Ordinance to amend Title 5, Chapter 5.20.130 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Motion Picture and Television Production, Appeal, together with other matters properly related thereto. Item F7, ordinance number 6559, ordinance to amend Title 12, Chapter 12.16.395 of the Reno Municipal Code entitled Sewer Service, Appeals to the Administrative Hearing Officer, together with other matters properly related thereto.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney. Before we take a motion on this, I just want to say again how much I appreciated the work of your attorney, Brian Sudi, on this. He was very responsive, made changes that I felt really improved a couple of these, and so I thank you for that. Before we take a motion, is there any other questions or comments on any of these items, F1 through F7? Okay, hearing none, I'm
Move to
going to
adopt.
ask, before we take the motion, just did we receive any public comment on these specific items?
No, we did not.
Okay, we did not. I'll open for a motion.
Move to adopt.
Second motion.
All right, I heard a motion from Mr. Reese and a second from Councilwoman Weber. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion is approved. Thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney, for that. We see that we have no items under City Clerk, item G. We'll be moving on to item H, Mayor and Council. This is the part of the meeting where we have City Council comments, including announcements. We discuss activities of our local charitable organizations and upcoming local community events, of which I would not be surprised if there are at least a couple of reports of things that have been going on. I'm going to, again, go through using our ward numbers, but at this time I'm going to start in reverse order. Mr. Reese.
And nothing to adopt.
Ms. Jardin.
Good for now.
Okay, Ms. Weber.
Nothing now. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Delgado.
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, Ms. Breckus.
Yeah, I do have something, and that is that Tumwa is scheduled to adopt or let to go into implementation rate increase in May of about 2.5%. They held it for a year last year, but now it's scheduled to go into effect. I think that Tumwa may have deliberations to halt that for another year, knowing that there's a lot of hardship and economic duress going on in the community. But that meeting has not been scheduled yet. So I know that my other Tumwa board members are aware and are working to help schedule that meeting and that discussion. But that might be something for us to talk about and think about, and also in relationship to our escalators on the sewer funds if we start to feel a need for relief to folks.
All right, thank you. I'll comment and then I'll ask our mayor. I just wanted to comment that over the last couple of weeks, as we've all grappled with the COVID-19 or coronavirus, depending on your preferred term in the moment, that I have been so impressed by the whole council. We have, and let me mention, of course, we are only as good as our staff. And the staff have been terrific in managing this element, setting up before we had the EOC, managing on a day-to-day basis for the last few weeks, and now with the EOC. I mean, truly terrific. And on the council, what I've seen is every single council member taking leadership in different areas, whether it's Stuff a Bus with Councilwoman Jordan, leading the effort to get goods and supplies for those most vulnerable, whether it is Councilmember Reese and Jordan working on the event center and working on the homeless issue, whether it is other council members, all of them. Mr. Delgado, obviously in your regular position, you're very stretched thin, being with medical as well as everything else, that the boards that you serve on. Ms. Breckus answering many constituent questions, I know. And Ms. Weber, the same. I know that all of us have been really stretched. I know we've been responding to constituents on Facebook, on email, on Twitter, on instant message, on text. They've been coming in every direction. There's a lot of uncertainty in our community, and I think that we've done a terrific job, and there is a hashtag, all in this together, or in this together, preferring, depending on your preferred use. But I am, in the entire 6 years I've been on the council, going on 7 now, I've never seen us pull together like this, and I'm just incredibly impressed with everything that's going on in our entire community, and how really many of the citizens are following first our mayor with her bold initiative to get ahead of the virus, and then our governor to, basically call on our entire citizenry of the state of Nevada, and then through all of the declarations that they've entered. I've been working on a project assigned to me by the mayor dealing with evictions, mortgages, and those kind of things. Hope to wrap that up soon, because many of our constituents are calling for some kind of relief, given that many of them find themselves out of a job. I also wanted to mention, I sent to you all at the request of the director of the Department of Employment, Rehabilitation, and Training. That is the department that does the unemployment claims. Obviously, they've been besieged, and I certainly was getting a lot of questions from my constituents. So we've gotten some materials. I have forwarded them all to you, both in English and Spanish, and we are going to try to get those materials in PDF or JPEG form so that we can use those on social media as well. So those seem to be some of the biggest questions coming at us from our constituents is, how do I get money and how do I defer bills? And so I think we're doing an excellent job on dealing with both. And I would say the third basket is a tremendous community outpouring about those that are either homeless or a step away from being homeless. So that's my comments for today, and I'll hand it over to the mayor.
Thank you so much. I can't express enough how I appreciate everyone's help during this time. The council has been fantastic. All of our staff at the city of Reno has been fantastic. And I just want you to know I am beyond grateful to work with each and every one of you. And the community doesn't get to see it, how hard everyone works, certainly at the city of Reno. And that's what you guys, that's why you work there, because you don't want the credit. But I wish the entire community could see how incredible the entire city of Reno team is. I'm so impressed. But that's what we do. We'll come together, we'll be resilient, and Reno will recover. But I just want you guys to know, it was probably one of the hardest times in my life last week. And every single one of you has really stepped up and been supportive. But I just need you guys to know that because this is just an unbelievable time that we're living in, and there's no playbook on something like this. I mean, to basically decimate your economy in a matter of 2 minutes in a press conference is just one of the hardest things that anyone could ever even imagine. But again, we're all trying to, work with this situation, and it moves so quickly. And I would just say, keep doing what you're doing. I still have more punch lists, but I'm so grateful for the entire team at the City of Reno. I know how hard that was, and everyone, again, just came together and did a phenomenal job. So I just want you guys to know that. Thanks.
All right, with that, let me ask our manager, Newbie, did you have any closing comments or thoughts for us as we bring the meeting to a close?
I do not.
Okay, well, I have to personally thank you. I know that this is a lot of sleepless nights and hard days for you and your entire senior staff, and it's hard not having the people that you work the closest with to be here to talk to. You either have to schedule a conference call or call them one by one. And we appreciate everything that the city staff are doing to keep us whole and to keep the city operational. So thank you. With that, let me ask our clerk, are there any public comments? You said at the end you would let us know if any public comments have been received.
Correct. We have received 3 public comments after the cutoff time of 4 o'clock yesterday. We received comment regarding concerns with the budget. 1 comment received acknowledging appreciation for council efforts on supporting the arts. 1 additional comment received regarding appreciation towards city staff members during this time. I also wanted to clarify from the earlier previous comment period, again, all of these have been sent to council and they've reviewed them. They will be available online. We received 23 comments earlier in regard to general concerns on COVID and various components of that. Again, council has that and that's in the record.
Okay. Let me ask before we adjourn, I know we have the Redevelopment Agency Board and there are a couple items on there, so I just wanted to alert everyone and remind them that we're not quite there. We're not quite done with our meeting today, but with no further comment, we'll adjourn.
Well, can I do want to make one comment. As
Okay.
I understand it, I want to make sure we clarify for the record that all of our decisions about keeping this room to a minimum in terms of number of people here, we have done that. There have only been, I think, as I counted, 9 people here at any given time. Also, that the public comment has been read by each of us. I believe there were very specific public comments that all of us have made reference to. But all of this is consistent with the governor's directive number 007, which was produced yesterday on 3/24, in the interest of making sure that our governments locally function and also comply with the spirit and intention of the open meeting law. And so I just want to make sure that for the public and for the record, that I have said that those things were done and we are consistent with the governor's directive.
Okay, fantastic.
And I'll move for an adjournment.
Thank you. Second? All right, I've seconded it.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Jarden, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we stand adjourned. We are going to convene the Redevelopment Agency Board, and I will ask for a roll call.
Ruckus,
Here.
Stewart,
Here.
Delgado,
Here.
Weber,
Here.
Darden,
Here.
Reese,
Here.
Sheevy,
Here.
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, you have a quorum of the Redevelopment Agency.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, was there any specific public comment for this part of the meeting?
No general public comment for redevelopment.
Okay.
All has been noted in the previous meeting.
All right, I will accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Second from Jordan.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Reese, second by Ms. Jarden. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, the agenda is approved, and next to the approval of the minutes, are these minutes good to go, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
All right, can I get a motion on approval of the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from, thank you, everyone. I know it's a little frustrating. We have a motion from Mr. Reese and a second from Ms. Weber. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, any opposed? The minutes are approved. We're moving on to item L5, which is a staff report with direction to proceed with negotiations in response to a request from Nevada Land LLC to purchase a 56,000 square foot portion of APN 011-450-24, which is indeed located immediately east of the Greater Nevada Field. So it is, it looks like it's less than an acre, is what I read this to be. Is that correct? Is there any staff that would like to present on this or tell us? Yes? Ms. Newby?
Councilmember Dewar, we are a little light on staff. I understand Mr. Thomas is on his way, but this is sort of an odd piece of land. We have received some interest in it, as you might see from Nevada Land, to purchase this. I understand that they may have need for it to put it to good use, perhaps as parking facilities for their employees once their employees are allowed to come back. Right about now, I'm just filling time until Mr. Thomas comes into the room.
Okay. Well, let me,
Could I be
yes,
identified or?
yes, absolutely. Why don't we just go to council questions? Councilwoman
Yeah,
Breakfast.
yeah, I guess my thinking is I don't object to going into a dialogue with them, but I think in light of everything, we should scope it out and get a more concrete recommendation. If it's parking, I'm not so sure. That's accessed by a road back there, and it'd be good to have some activity back there. I think sometimes they dump their turf back there, but this is the land that the generator was going to amenitize, and it really is a part of a trail network. So a parking lot, I don't know. Obviously, we've had challenges making that area hospitable to those who want to recreate. But maybe they could come forward at a subsequent meeting with a bigger vision of how that whole area is going to be used. As y'all recall, that's where you start at the Auto Museum. You go down the path, you cross over the Old Wells Avenue Bridge, then you wind your way around along this path to essentially Sutro Street, where it's, you know, the lights are at the transfer station, and then you can continue down along to the brewery district on 4th Street. So it is this really neat circular route that people like to take to recreate, and you know, maybe they can help us with that goal, and they can get what they need out there too. I think it's exciting, but I think it should be just the starting point of a conversation to have the council understand that bigger area back there. And there's a power box back there also.
All right, and I see Mr. Thomas has joined us, so would you like to address this?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, Bill Thomas, for the record, Assistant City Manager. Apologize for being here late. I was listening like everyone else and didn't jump on it quick enough. So the background on this is we have been having conversations with a Nevada Land LLC, or the ACEs, about this particular area for quite some time. When we first talked to them, the property was under an agreement with the generator, and as is mentioned, they were going to put in basically a landscape area and then also a community facility. They have since terminated that, so this property is now basically unplanned or unclaimed in terms of any use. The one thing I wanted to make clear in terms of their ask is when you look through the information that we included, I'm not sure how our technology is working in this situation, but
They can see on the screen if you put something up.
yes, no, okay. There it is, okay. So the part of property of the property that we're talking about is the area here that is shown, and I guess I'll point to it. Starting in this area on the south west corner and then extending over to essentially where the overpass, the Wells overpass is. It does not.
We're not.
Yes,
I can't see it.
Councilwoman Jordan, did you have a quick question?
They can't see it.
Oh, they can't see
We
it?
can't see anything.
All right, if you have a computer, you can pull up the attachment on your screen, but otherwise, I will ask Mr. Thomas to not point, but actually use his words to describe this in more detail.
Okay, so there should be in your packet 3 different maps. Hopefully you have those. What I would the way I'll describe this is as you come out of the back door of the Aces Stadium, you come across a substation that is owned by NV Energy. As you proceed to the east, moving towards Wells, the Wells overpass, there is a long, narrow piece of property. There's actually 2 parcels in there. The one along the river, which is owned by the city, and then the one that is just to the north to that sits between the river and the railroad tracks. We are not talking about the city's parcel, which is along the river and where the path is that I think Councilmember Breck has talked about. That is not part of the conversation. What we are talking about is the westernmost sliver of the parcel that the generator was going to occupy with their facility.
And I will just interrupt you for a moment. I've gotten notice that they can see the map now, so if you want to add pointing to your words, you can.
Okay. So when you look at this exhibit, you'll see that there are some textured areas, and those areas are easements. The first one right here, which is an access easement to the back end of the stadium as well as to the substation. So that limits what that property could be used for because those access points need to be remained open. The second area is a drainage easement. And then the third is an easement that's there for maintenance and care of the Wells overpass. So as you can see from this picture, the property itself is very limited in terms of its ability to be used. And given the conversations that are going on with the ACEs about potentially using their parking lot for a parking structure or some residential development and our need for residential housing, it became apparent in conversations with them that they are probably going to need some additional space for the operations of the stadium. So there's nothing specific now because they did not want to be honest, spend a lot of time and energy coming up with a detailed plan of how they might use it until they had a sense of whether the council was even interested in pursuing a conversation just about the westernmost part of this property. It's fully been staff's intent to come back to the council with a conversation in the future about the easternmost parcel, which is the most usable part of the property. In other words, from Wells Avenue Bridge going to the east over to the cul-de-sac, that's actually developable land. And so we were here on behalf of Nevada Land LLC simply to ask the question, is there's interest at council to give them an opportunity to present to you a plan, an idea of how they would like to use that property, then that's what we're looking for today. If there isn't, then I'll certainly tell them that there's no interest.
Okay, I'll make a quick 2 questions and then I'll go again in ward order. My question, Mr. Thomas, has to do with 2 things. One, clearly you made a comment about the generator. Have they formally withdrawn their interest in this parcel under the bridge?
I'm sorry. Yes, they have, and it's part of the packet, their letter rescinding their request to the council for the property.
Okay. And number 2, I just wanted to alert you, if we should go forward, if you check into the Truckee River Flood Management Authority, their diagram for this area, you will see about a couple hundred feet to the west or left of the bridge, which is shown if you can move the picture a little bit, which is shown on your picture. There is shown a pedestrian crossing bridge over the river, and so to the left on the north bank. Yep, right about in there. It would go from the south to the north bank. And I think it's really right around the curve area. And in fact, it may be where that little light line is across the river. Anyway, the point is that in the flood project, there is some concrete from the old road underneath the Wells overpass. And that old road blocks water and causes flooding. The flood project had planned to demo the old concrete, but still provide access across the bank for pedestrians, bikers, and such. So if we do move forward with any kind of sale, I want to make sure we understand where the path was supposed to go on both sides of the river, so that we retain an easement for that in conjunction with the flood project. There may also supposed to be built some kind of levee along in there, which I just don't recall. I recall clearly the bridge, but I don't recall as clearly levees. And so I just want before, during your due diligence process to go and make sure we have in writing an affirmative discussion of those two features, any bridge or any levee. Okay.
Understood.
Okay. And then one other aspect, I know that our police officers use the remaining concrete roadway that's under Wells Avenue. They often, utilize that to access both sides of the river. And I think we just have to think through alternate access for them if we want to have them continue patrolling north, east and west in that section of the river. So it's just something to think about as well.
If I might, just quickly to that, there was no contemplation in these conversations that current access under the bridge would be impacted in any way. So the idea would be for us, as you've said, to explore with Nevada Land what kind of use that property might be put to that's better than the current use, which is really no use at all.
Right. All right. Well, I'll yield my time, and I'm going to go by ward order again. Ward 1, Jenny Breckus.
Thank you. I mean, I already mentioned some thoughts, but I do think perhaps we should go forward, but with a few considerations. Is one, in return, maybe they are stewardship of the entire roadway there, which is not improved and maybe needs to get improved to some degree if we're going to be parking and driving over it, because if not, we got some air quality issues. We don't do unpaved roads in the city of Reno. Two, we do have the support payments with them, which is about an $800,000 hit from a budget area each year. So maybe it's, something about that is looked at. And three, we have the surplus for baseball improvements. And maybe that is put on the program for that, and the funds are used to improve that whole area as, both the recreation and their needs. So I think it could be a positive discussion with them that we should go forward, but we should also have it be a negotiated one.
All right, thank you. Move on to Ward 3, Councilman Delgado.
Yes, hi. No, thus far the questions have been asked. I appreciate all the questions actually that you asked, Councilwoman Dewar. Same concerns, and appreciate the insight that Assistant City Manager Bill Thomas has been able to provide thus far.
All right, thanks so much. Ward 4, Councilwoman Weber.
Thank you. I appreciate the other comments, and I think we need to move forward
All right.
with the discussion.
All right, thanks so much. And then Ward 5, Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. I do support moving forward discussions with them and agree that there needs to be more broad discussions at that time as they relate to improvements to kind of the entire area, as well as our related support payments to them. So I would make a motion to move forward.
All right, and let's hear from two others. Councilmember Reese.
A second.
Okay.
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay, and Madam Mayor, did you have any comments before we get a motion?
No, I just seconded. Thanks.
Okay, so we had a motion from Councilwoman Jordan, a second from our mayor. Hillary Sheevy. All in favor to move forward with negotiations on this property?
Aye.
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 All right, any opposed?
Aye.
All right, looks like we have a unanimous direction to our staff on moving forward. Thank you, staff, for bringing this forward to us. I think this could be an improvement in this area. We'll move on to close that item and move on to L6, which is any general comments for the Redevelopment Agency Board, including announcements, city boards, commissions, activities, organizations, community events. And I'll just quickly go in reverse order, starting with Councilman Reese.
Nothing.
All right, Councilwoman Jordan.
Nothing.
All right, Councilwoman Weber.
Nothing. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Delgado.
Nothing, thank you.
All right, thank you. I have nothing. Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I do think that we did not get to the redevelopment agency very far in our budget. I mean, obviously the budget's been sent down and it's a combined budget, but I think our next meeting, we do need to look to the budgetary implications of the debt that RDA 1 is carrying and what the workout, we were mid-workout on that, and I think that needs to come back on the next meeting, if
All right.
possible.
All right, thank you. Great point. And then, Madam Mayor, any closing comments for us on this?
No, thanks.
All right. With that, this was a non-action item, so we'll move to general public comment for redevelopment agency. And let me ask our clerk, do we have any comments on this part of the meeting?
I have received none.
All right. Seeing no comments, we have a motion for adjournment from Councilmember Reese.
Second.
We have a second from Councilwoman Weber. All in favor? Aye. Our meeting.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Our meeting is adjourned, and I have to compliment everyone. I think this went exceedingly well. I thank everyone for their participation and the public for learning with us on a new mechanism. So we'll see you all on the next meeting. Thank you so much.